The transport bus rumbled along the dusty road, its windows streaked with desert grit. Inside, the recruits sat in stiff silence, their bodies swaying with each bump. Most of them were men, broad-shouldered and hard-eyed, already bonding over. Shared jokes and hushed talk about rifles, missions, and the hell weeks they had endured to be here. Elena Torres sat quietly near the back. Her rifle case rested upright between her knees, her gloved hands resting lightly on top of it as if guarding a sacred object. She wasn't laughing or swapping stories. She stared out the window, watching. The barren stretch of Nevada desert give way to the outline of the naval training compound. The steel fences glinted in the afternoon sun, topped with coils of razor wire that shimmered like silver snakes. Beyond it rose a series of squat concrete buildings and long ranges where distant silhouettes fired practice rounds. As the bus slowed, the men's chatter died down. They all felt it, the weight of the place. It wasn't like the training they'd already endured. This was different. This was advanced sniper training, where reputations were built or destroyed, where only precision and discipline separated the elite from the forgotten. The bus doors hissed open. Off. Barked the instructor, his voice clipped, used to command. One by one, the recruits filed off, shouldering their duffels, carrying their weapons. Boots thudded on the asphalt, dust rising with each step. Elena stepped down last, her head held high, her dark hair pulled back tightly beneath her cap. The sun glared off her sunglasses, masking her eyes, but not the determination etched into her face. She could feel it instantly, the shift in the air. Conversations halted, heads turned. Men glanced at one another, smirking, whispering. She didn't need to hear the words. She had heard them before, countless times. What's she doing here? This is sniper training, not a show. She'd never last. At the far end of the yard, a tall, broad-shouldered man stood waiting. His uniform was crisp, his posture rigid, the kind of presence that needed no introduction. Commander Briggs. He had led missions across 3 continents, had trained some. Of the sharpest shooters in the Navy SEALs, and his reputation for being ruthless in training was legendary. His eyes locked on Elena as the recruits lined up. His expression gave nothing away, but his silence spoke volumes. He had already judged her. The instructor called roll, voice echoing in the open air. Each name was answered with a sharp, "Here." "Sir," until it came to hers. "Torres Elena." She stepped forward slightly, her voice steady. "Here, sir." Briggs's gaze lingered on her a moment, too long before he continued, and Elena felt it, the subtle dismissal, the unspoken question of why she was even standing in that line. Once the roll was finished, Briggs stepped forward, his voice booming. "You've made it this far," he said, scanning the line of men. "That doesn't mean a damn thing here. Out there in the field, you get one chance, one shot. You miss, your team dies. You panic, your mission fails. Some of you will leave. Here better snipers. Some of you will leave broken. A few of you won't make it to the end at all." His eyes swept across the recruits again, before stopping deliberately on Elena. "If you're here expecting special treatment, you're in the wrong place. Out here, there are no exceptions. No excuses." A ripple of smirks passed among the men, subtle but not hidden. Elena caught them from the corner of her eye, but remained still, her face impassive. Briggs clapped his hands once. "Get your gear. Report to the range in 10. The recruits broke formation, heading toward the barracks. Elena felt the eyes on her back as she walked, but she refused to quicken her pace. Inside, her heart hammered. Not from fear, but from the familiar burn of having to prove herself again. She thought of her father, a retired Marine, who had taught her to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold a rifle steady. His voice echoed in her memory. Don't prove them wrong, Mia. Prove yourself right. The barracks smelled of metal and dust. Bunks lined the walls, duffels dropped onto mattresses, boots thudding on the concrete floor. Elena found her bunk near the end, setting her rifle case down carefully. A pair of recruits across from her exchanged glances and snickered. "Hope you brought more than makeup in that case," one of them muttered. The other chuckled. Maybe she thinks this is just a photo shoot. Elena unclasped the case with a sharp click. The laughter died instantly when the lid opened. Inside lay a precision rifle, meticulously maintained, its matte black finish gleaming faintly under the fluorescent lights. She lifted it with practiced ease, checking the scope, the bolt, the barrel. Every motion was precise, efficient, second nature. Without looking up, she said quietly, "Makeup won't save you at 600 meters." The room fell silent. 10 minutes later, they were on the range. The Nevada sun was unforgiving, heat waves rippling off the desert sand. Targets stood at varying distances, some static, others rigged to move unpredictably across rails. Briggs strode down the line, handing out assignments. When he reached Elena, he paused. Instead of giving her the standard-issue rifle like the others, he tossed her a battered case, dented and worn. "Let's see what you can do with this," he said. Flatly, Elena opened it to find an older sniper rifle, its scope scratched, the stock chipped. It was still functional, but it was no match for the polished rifles the others carried. She glanced up, meeting Briggs's eyes. He was testing her, pushing her, daring her to fail. She said nothing. She simply lifted the weapon, adjusted the worn scope, and lay prone on the mat. The command came, "Fire at will." Shots cracked across the range. The air filled with the staccato rhythm of rifles discharging, brass casings clinking against the mats. Elena slowed her breathing, ignoring the defects of her weapon, adjusting for wind, for the slight drag in the trigger. Her crosshairs danced. For a moment, then steadied. She squeezed. The target at 400 meters dropped instantly, the round dead center. A second shot, 500 meters. Another clean hit. One by one, her shots rang out, each as steady as the last. Her groupings were tighter than most of the others on the line, despite their better weapons. By the time she lowered the rifle, sweat dripping down her brow, the whispers had gone silent. Even the smirks had faded. Briggs said nothing. He simply marked something on his clipboard and walked on. But Elena caught it, the briefest flicker of surprise in his eyes, before his mask of indifference returned. For her, that was enough. That night, as the barracks lights dimmed and the men drifted off into uneasy sleep, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The day had been just the beginning. She knew the road ahead would be harder, the tests crueler, the doubts louder. But she also knew something else. She belonged here. And she was ready to prove it one shot at a time. The sun had barely risen when the recruits were roused from their bunks by the shrill blast of a whistle. Boots hit the concrete floor, men groaning as they scrambled into uniforms, lacing their V's. Boots with practiced speed. Elena was already awake. She had been lying in her bunk since before dawn, staring into the shadows, her mind steady, her body ready. She moved without hesitation, dressing quickly, braiding her dark hair tightly, and slinging her rifle case over her shoulder. By the time the second whistle blew, she was already at the door, waiting. The barracks emptied into the cool desert. Morning. The compound was alive with movement trucks rumbling, instructors shouting, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing from a nearby range. Dust rose under the recruits' boots as they formed a loose line, waiting for orders. Commander Briggs appeared, tall and imposing as ever, his expression carved from stone. His presence alone demanded silence. He scanned the line of recruits, his gaze pausing on Elena, for a fraction longer than necessary. His lip twitched, almost imperceptibly, before he moved on. "Today," he announced, voice carrying across the yard, "you'll be issued your training gear. What you get is what you'll use, until you prove you deserve better." Snipers don't complain about their tools, they make them work. The recruits muttered among themselves, some smirking with confidence, others nervous. One by one, names were called, rifles handed out sleek, modern weapons with fresh optics, crisp bolts, and polished barrels. Each man ran his hand over the gear with reverence, grinning as if Christmas had come early. Then Briggs reached Elena Torres. She stepped forward, posture straight, eyes unflinching. Briggs didn't hand her one of the polished rifles. Instead, he gestured to a battered case sitting on the ground beside him. Its metal was dented, the hinges rusted, and dust clung to every corner. "Yours," he said simply. The men around her exchanged glances. A few chuckled under their breath. Elena crouched, picked up the case, and opened it. Inside lay an old sniper, rifle older than most of the men standing in line. The stock was chipped, the paint scratched, and the scope lens bore a thin crack along its edge. It was still serviceable, but barely. Briggs watched her closely, waiting for a flicker of hesitation, a sign of frustration. Elena gave him nothing. She lifted the rifle with steady hands, tested its weight, and slung it over her shoulder as though it were brand new. "Understood, sir," she said calmly. Briggs narrowed his eyes, but moved on, calling the next name. The first drill of the Hur. Day was a long-distance run across rugged terrain packs weighted down, rifles slung, the desert heat already climbing. The recruits surged forward at the signal, sand crunching beneath their boots, breaths coming hard and fast. Elena kept her pace steady, refusing to let the adrenaline drive her too fast too soon. She ignored the whispers from the men around. Her dead weight'll never keep up. Bet she drops before the first mile. But she didn't drop. She ran. Her legs burned, sweat stung her eyes, and her pack dragged at her shoulders, but she kept running. She measured her breaths, matched them to the rhythm of her strides, the way her father had taught her when she was still a teenager training on desert trails in Arizona. By the time they reached the finish line, several recruits had fallen behind, collapsing in the dust, gasping for air. Elena crossed with the middle of the pack, not first, not last, but steady. And steady, she knew, was what mattered in the long run. The next drill was weapons assembly. Under the blazing sun, each recruit was ordered to strip their rifle down to the last pin and reassemble it under a strict time limit. For the others, with their polished weapons, the task was straightforward. For Elena, with her battered relic, it was anything but. The screws stuck, the worn parts resisted, the cracked. Scope rattled when she detached it. Sweat dripped down her face as she fought with the stubborn mechanisms, her hands working with precision, but slowed by the rifle's condition. Around her, the men finished one by one, slapping their bolts into place with satisfied grins. Briggs loomed nearby, arms crossed, his gaze locked on her. "Problem, Torres?" he asked, voice dripping with mock patience. "No, sir," she answered, though her hands ached from the effort. She forced the bolt into place, tightened the last screw, and finally snapped the rifle back together. It took longer than the others, and she knew Briggs had marked it down. But she didn't flinch. She laid the weapon across her lap, her breathing calm. She had finished. That was enough for now. Lunch in the mess hall was no easier. The recruits crowded around tables, trays clattering, voices rising in laughter and conversation. Elena carried her tray quietly, searching for a seat. Every table seemed full, though she could see space left empty deliberately between men, who avoided her gaze. Finally, she sat alone at the corner table, her back to the wall, her eyes scanning the room as she ate. It didn't take long for the comments to start. Maybe she thought this was some kind of equal opportunity project. Wonder how long till Briggs sends her packing. Hope she doesn't slow us down on the range. Elena ate in silence. Every bite measured, every muscle in her body willing itself not to react. She had faced worse before ridicule in high school, doubters at the academy, even instructors who thought she was wasting her time. She had learned the same lesson over and over. Words meant nothing. Results meant everything. That evening, back on the range, results were what mattered. The drill was precision shooting under shifting conditions. Targets were placed at irregular distances, some moving, others partially concealed. The wind picked up across the desert, kicking dust into the air, rattling the targets on their stands. The recruits took their positions, lying prone in the sand, adjusting their scopes. Elena lay down with her battered rifle, adjusting the cracked scope, tilting it slightly to account for the distortion along the edge. The men beside her smirked, their sleek rifles gleaming in the fading sunlight. "Don't choke, Torres," one of them muttered. She ignored him. The signal came. Shots rang out in rapid succession, each recruit firing at their targets. Elena slowed her breathing, blocking out the noise, focusing only on the crosshairs. The crack in the lens blurred her vision, but she compensated, adjusting her aim, recalculating with every shot. Her rifle barked once target down. Again clean hit. Again perfect center. She kept firing, her movements smooth, her rhythm unbroken. By the time the drill ended, her targets bore tight, precise groupings. They weren't just good, they were some of the best on the range. The laughter died. The smirks faded. Even Briggs paused, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing as he studied her results. He said nothing, but Elena caught the shift in his gaze. No longer dismissive, no longer certain she didn't belong. She had forced him to notice. That night, exhaustion weighed heavy on the recruits. Bodies ached, tempers flared, and bunks creaked as men settled in for a few precious hours of rest. The barracks was filled with snores and muffled groans, the stench of sweat and dust lingering in the air. Elena lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling again, her rifle resting beside her. The day replayed in her mind, the run, the assembly, the shooting drill, the doubt in their eyes, the smirks, the silence when her shots found their mark. She knew it wasn't enough yet. One good performance wouldn't erase their doubts, wouldn't silence the whispers. She would have to do it again, and again, until they had no choice but to see her for what she was, a sniper. Her fingers traced the worn stock of her rifle, every scratch and dent a reminder of the commander's challenge. It wasn't just a weapon. It was her crucible, and she would master it. With that thought, she closed her eyes. The desert winds howled outside, rattling the barracks windows. Tomorrow would bring new tests, harsher trials, heavier doubts. But Elena Torres was ready, because she knew something the others didn't yet understand. Snipers weren't made by the rifles they carried. Snipers were made by the fire in their hearts, and hers burned hotter than ever. The sun had barely risen when the recruits were roused from their bunks by the shrill blast of a whistle. Boots hit the concrete floor, men groaning as they scrambled into uniforms, lacing their boots with practiced speed. Elena was already awake. She had been lying in her bunk since before dawn, staring into the shadows, her mind steady, her body ready. She moved without hesitation, dressing quickly, braiding her dark hair tightly, and slinging her rifle case over her shoulder. By the time the second whistle blew, she was already at the door, waiting. The barracks emptied into the cool desert morning. The compound was alive with movement trucks rumbling, instructors shouting, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing from a nearby range. Dust rose under the recruits' boots as they formed a loose line, waiting for orders. Commander Briggs appeared, tall and imposing as ever, his expression carved from stone. His presence alone demanded silence. He scanned the line of recruits, his gaze pausing on Elena for a fraction longer than necessary. His lip twitched, almost imperceptibly, before he moved on. "Today," he announced, voice carrying across the yard, "you'll be issued your training gear. What you get is what you'll use until you prove you deserve better. Snipers don't complain about their tools, they make them work." The recruits muttered among themselves, some smirking with confidence, others nervous. One by one, names were called, rifles handed out sleek, modern weapons with fresh optics, crisp bolts, and polished barrels. Each man ran his hand over the gear with reverence, grinning as if Christmas had come early. Then Briggs reached Elena, Torres. She stepped forward, posture straight, eyes unflinching. Briggs didn't hand her one of the polished rifles. Instead, he gestured to a battered case sitting on the ground beside him. Its metal was dented, the hinges rusted, and dust clung to every corner. "Yours," he said simply. The men around her exchanged glances. A few chuckled under their breath. The morning air was sharper than usual, a cold bite rolling down from the desert mountains. The recruits gathered at the long-range training ground, shifting uneasily as instructors set up the day's course. The rumor had already spread through the compound. This wasn't just another drill. This was their first trial. Commander Briggs stood at the front, clipboard in hand, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the sand. His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Today we find out who has potential and who doesn't. The course is timed. Multiple targets, varying distances, unpredictable movement. One miss and you fail. Two misses and you're off my range. Understood?" The recruits answered in unison. "Yes, sir." Briggs's eyes swept across the line, resting for a moment on Elena Torres. His face remained impassive, but his silence was weighted. Everyone knew what he thought, that she didn't belong, that she'd fold under pressure. "First up," Briggs barked, "Carter." A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward. Carter was Briggs's favorite, the golden recruit with years of service and a reputation for never missing a shot. The others respected him, even feared him. Briggs trusted him. Carter cracked his neck, adjusted his rifle, and strode to the firing line with the swagger of a man who knew he would win. The course was brutal targets at staggered distances, some hidden in brush, others swinging across rails at unpredictable speeds. The wind was erratic, shifting in sudden gusts that could ruin a shot if the sniper didn't account for it. Carter dropped prone, his sleek rifle gleaming in the sunlight. The signal came, and he began firing. Crack. Target down. Crack. Another hit. Crack, crack. Two moving targets in quick succession. His shots were fast, precise, confident. The men behind him muttered in approval. By the time the last target fell, Carter rolled to his feet, smirking. He had cleared the course with only one near miss. His time was impressive. Briggs nodded once, satisfied. "Good work, Carter. Standard I expect from my snipers." Carter glanced toward Elena as he stepped. Back in line, his grin smug. "Try not to embarrass yourself, Torres." A ripple of laughter spread through the group. Briggs's gaze shifted. "Torres, you're up." Elena stepped forward, her battered rifle slung across her shoulder. The laughter died down, replaced by the quiet hum of anticipation. Every man there wanted to see her fail. She laid her rifle on the mat, adjusted her scope, and lowered herself into position. The weapon felt familiar now, an extension of her body despite its flaws. She ran her hands along the stock, checking for loose pieces, steadying her breathing. The course stretched out before her, sun glaring off the sand, targets barely visible at the far end. The signal came. Elena's world narrowed. Her first shot cracked, and the target at 300 meters fell instantly. Her second shot rang out, striking dead center at 400. She adjusted for wind, squeezed the trigger, another clean hit. Her rhythm was different from Carter's. She wasn't rushing. She moved with deliberate precision, every breath measured, every squeeze of the trigger controlled. Where Carter's style was aggressive, hers was calm, methodical, unshakable. The moving targets came next. She tracked them slowly, patient, waiting for the perfect moment. Crack, one down, crack, another. The wind shifted suddenly, dust swirling across the range. Carter had muscled through it with speed, but Elena paused, calculating the change. Adjusting her angle, she exhaled slowly and fired. The round cut through the gust, striking the target clean. By the time she reached the final station, silence had fallen behind her. The smirks were gone. The whispers had stopped. Every man was watching, breath held, eyes fixed on her. Elena lined up her last shot at 600 meters, the cracked scope distorting the edges of the target. She steadied her breathing, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. Crack! The target dropped. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the course. Elena rose slowly, dust clinging to her uniform. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply slung her rifle back over her shoulder and walked to the line, her expression calm, her breathing even. The results appeared on the board a moment later. Elena Torres. Time, faster than Carter. Accuracy, 100%. A ripple of shock swept through the recruits. Carter's jaw clenched. Briggs's pen hovered above his clipboard for a long moment before he finally marked the results. No one spoke. Elena stood in silence, eyes forward, as if it were nothing, more than another drill. But inside, her heart pounded with fire. She hadn't just passed. She had outshot Briggs's best. The rest of the day's drills were a blur. The other recruits went through the course, but none matched Elena's precision. Carter tried to shrug it off, muttering excuses about luck and wind conditions, but his words rang hollow. The others had seen it with their own eyes. That night, in the barracks, the atmosphere was different. No one laughed when Elena entered. The whispers had quieted. The respect wasn't spoken aloud, but it was there in the way they glanced at her rifle, in the way they left a space for her at the table in the mess hall. Carter sat nearby, his face stormy. "Don't think this changes anything?" he muttered. "One good run doesn't make you a sniper." Elena didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her results had spoken louder than any words. Later, as the barracks lights dimmed, Elena lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The trial replayed in her mind, the targets, the shots, the silence that followed. She thought of her father's voice again, guiding her steady breathing, reminding her. That calm was her weapon. But she also thought of Briggs. The commander had said nothing. No praise, no acknowledgement. But she had seen it, the flicker of surprise in his eyes, the hesitation in his pen, the tightness in his jaw when her results appeared. He couldn't deny her skill. Not anymore. For Elena, that was enough for now. But deep down, she knew. This was only the beginning. Briggs wouldn't let this stand. He would push her harder, test her further, challenge her until she broke. And she would be ready. Because Elena Torres hadn't come this far just to prove them wrong. She had come to prove herself right. The Nevada sun was sinking low, staining the desert sky in streaks of crimson and gold when the call came. Recruits had just finished another grueling day on the range, sweat-soaked, dust-caked, and bone-tired, when an instructor marched in and barked, "Report to the operations room. Now." The barracks stirred instantly. Men scrambled to their feet, pulling on boots and uniforms, their chatter laced with nervous energy. It wasn't unusual to be summoned for drills, but something in the instructor's tone carried more weight. This wasn't training. Elena slung her battered rifle over her shoulder and fell in with the others as they filed out into the cooling desert night. The compound buzzed with unusual activity. Trucks moving in and out, radio chatter spilling from command tents, silhouettes of officers moving briskly with folders and maps clutched in their hands. The air carried a tension Elena hadn't felt before, sharp and electric, like the moments before a storm. Inside the operations room, the recruits gathered around a long table. A projector hummed, casting grainy satellite images onto a white screen at the front. Desert ridges and rocky valleys filled the display, dotted with heat signatures. Commander Briggs stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed, expression grim. For once, the skepticism in his eyes wasn't directed solely at Elena. It was spread evenly across the room. He let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping over every face. "This isn't a drill," he said finally, his voice low but commanding. "This is a live mission." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Some of the men stiffened, others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Elena felt her pulse quicken, but her face remained composed. Briggs continued. "Intelligence has confirmed an enemy cell operating in the highlands south of the border. They've established multiple lookout positions here." He tapped the map. Red dots flaring on the ridges, 11 in total. These lookouts are feeding information to a larger force moving supplies through the valley. If they spot our team, the entire operation is compromised. We cannot afford that. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Our job is to move in, secure the valley, and disrupt the supply chain. But we can't take a single step until those 11 eyes are closed, permanently. The recruits shifted uneasily. The number wasn't small, and the positioning made it worse. The lookouts were spread across jagged ridges, with overlapping lines of sight. It would take precision, timing, and absolute silence. Briggs's jaw tightened. That means we need a sniper. Someone who can drop every target before they have a chance to raise an alarm. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Carter. "Carter, you'll lead the overwatch." Carter straightened, pride swelling in his chest. The decision was no surprise. He was Briggs's favorite, the golden shooter, the man everyone expected to handle the mission. He smirked as if the assignment were already complete. But Briggs didn't stop there. "You'll have backup," he added reluctantly. His gaze slid toward Elena, cold and skeptical. "Torres." The room went silent. Elena felt every eye turn toward her, a wave of disbelief rolling through the men. Carter's smirk faltered into a scowl. "With respect, sir," Carter said. Quickly, "We don't need." Briggs cut him off with a glare. "I'll decide what we need." He looked back at Elena, his voice sharp. "You'll be secondary. You'll observe, provide cover if needed, and nothing more. You follow Carter's lead? Understood?" Elena held his gaze, her voice steady. "Understood, sir." Briggs studied her a moment longer, as if daring her to challenge him, before turning back to the group. "You'll move at 0200. Gear up, double-check your weapons, and be ready." Dismissed. The recruits spilled out of the operations room, buzzing with chatter. Some were excited, others nervous. Most were skeptical. Carter stormed ahead, his jaw tight, muttering to the men beside him. "Back up? She's going to slow me down. This isn't training. It's a mission. One mistake out there, and we're all dead." The others nodded, murmuring agreement. None of them wanted to say it too loudly, but the doubt was clear. No one trusted Elena with their lives. Elena walked alone at the back, her rifle case bumping lightly against her leg. She heard the whispers, but didn't react. She had learned long ago that silence was her weapon. Words wouldn't change their minds. Only results would. Back in the barracks, the atmosphere shifted. The men polished their rifles, checked their scopes, and loaded magazines with methodical precision. The room smelled of gun oil and metal, the sharp click of bolts sliding into place, filling the air. Elena sat on her bunk, dismantling her battered rifle piece by piece. She cleaned each part with practiced care, running a cloth along the barrel, adjusting the cracked scope until the distortion was minimized. Her hands moved steadily, but her mind raced. This was it. A real mission, real stakes. 11 targets standing between success and disaster. And the commander had put her on the team, not because he trusted her, but because he wanted her to fail under pressure. She remembered her father's words again, echoing from years past. Shooting in practice is easy. Shooting when lives depend on it, that's what makes a sniper. She reassembled the rifle, sliding the bolt into place. With a satisfying click. Across the room, Carter watched her with a sneer. "Don't think you're going to steal the spotlight out there," he said, his voice low but sharp. "This is my mission. You just stay out of the way." Elena looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I'll do my job." "That's what I'm afraid of," he muttered before turning away. Midnight crept slowly. The compound was quiet, the desert air cold and heavy with anticipation. At 0130, the team assembled near the transport trucks, their gear loaded, faces painted. In dark camouflage, the hum of engines filled the stillness, headlights cutting across the sand. Elena adjusted her pack, slung her rifle across her back, and climbed into the truck with the others. No one spoke. The tension was palpable, the air thick with nerves. The truck rumbled across the desert, every bump jostling the men inside. Elena stared out the window, the moon casting long shadows across the jagged ridges. Somewhere out there, 11 men stood watch, their eyes scanning the darkness, unaware of what was coming. The thought didn't shake her. If anything, it steadied her. She wasn't afraid of the targets. She was afraid of failing the men beside her, men who already doubted her, men who would never forgive her if she slipped. The truck screeched to a halt. The back door slammed open. "Move out," the instructor barked. The seals spilled into the night, boots crunching softly against the sand, rifles slung, eyes sharp. The desert air was icy, their breaths visible. In the moonlight, Elena adjusted her pack, tightened the strap on her rifle, and fell in step behind Carter. He led the way toward the ridge, his posture rigid, his movements sharp. The others followed silently, shadows in the moonlight. As they moved deeper into the desert, the valley stretched out below them, a dark expanse dotted with faint lights, campfires, radios, enemy silhouettes. The lookout positions were there, just as the satellite images had shown. 11 eyes watching, waiting. Carter crouched low, signaling for the team to halt. He glanced back at Elena, his expression hard. "This is it," he whispered. "Stay. Quiet. Stay down. And don't screw this up." Elena met his gaze, her voice calm. "Just make sure you hit your targets." He scowled, but said nothing. The team fanned out, moving into position. Elena crawled toward a rocky perch overlooking the valley, her rifle cradled against her chest. She settled into place, adjusted her scope, and scanned the ridges. The lookouts were there, shadows silhouetted against the moonlit rocks, rifles slung, eyes searching the valley below. They were alert but not alarmed, unaware that death was already staring at them through Elena's crosshairs. She slowed her breathing, steadied her hands, and let the world shrink down to the narrow circle of her scope. 11 targets, 11 chances. The mission had begun. The desert night was still, eerily so. Not a breeze stirred the jagged ridges. Not a whisper of movement among the rocks. The moon hung low and sharp, washing the valley in silver light. Elena lay prone against the cold stone, her cheek pressed firmly against the worn stock of her rifle. Through the cracked scope, the world shrank into a circle of clarity, a single lookout silhouetted against the skyline. He shifted occasionally, raising binoculars, scanning the horizon. He had no idea that he was already marked for death. To her left, Carter was already in position. His movements were confident but impatient, his scope flicking from target to target like a predator scenting prey. He breathed heavily, muttering under his breath. "On my mark," Carter whispered into the comms. His tone carried the weight of authority, the assumption that everyone would follow his lead. Elena said nothing. She adjusted her sights, slow and deliberate, letting her breathing settle into a rhythm. Breathe in. Breathe out. Pause. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. 3, 2, Carter began. Before he could say 1, a sharp crack split the silence. A lookout crumpled instantly, a clean shot through the eye socket. Carter froze, shocked. Elena didn't flinch. She adjusted slightly, already lining up her second target. "God damn it, Torres!" Carter hissed into the comms. "You don't fire until I say." Another crack. Another silhouette dropped, tumbling silently down the rocks. The radio went silent. For a moment, even Carter had no words. Far below, the valley remained unaware. The enemy campfires flickered undisturbed, radios buzzed faintly. Sentries walked their rounds. The lookouts had been posted to watch for large movements, not to fear the single kiss of death from a sniper's bullet. Elena's scope moved fluidly, like a painter's brush across a canvas. Each target was a brushstroke, each shot a line in her silent masterpiece. Third target, 780 yards, crouched against a rock, fiddling with a cigarette. The glow of the lighter betrayed him. Breathe in. Breathe out. Pause. Crack. The cigarette fell from his fingers before he ever tasted it. On the ridge, Carter struggled. His first shot missed, sending a puff of dust an inch from the lookout's leg. The man jolted, raising his radio in alarm. Before Carter could fire again, Elena's bullet found the lookout's temple. The body slumped, the radio clattering uselessly against stone. Carter cursed under his breath. "That was mine." "No," Elena murmured, calm and detached. "That was ours." The team below moved in silence, advancing inch by inch across the valley floor. Every shot Elena fired cleared a path for them. They depended on her now, even if most of them didn't want to admit it. Target 5, standing near a rusted antenna, scanning the horizon through night vision goggles. A professional. His movements were disciplined, his stance steady. He was the kind of lookout who could have been Elena's equal if roles were reversed. Elena respected him in a way. Then she killed him. The crack echoed faintly, and he dropped like a marionette with cut strings. 5 down, she whispered into comms. The men advancing below exchanged silent glances. Carter stayed quiet. The ridge smelled faintly of gunpowder now, though the desert wind carried it away quickly. Elena's cheek pressed into the stock, her shoulder absorbing the steady rhythm of recoil. She was part of the rifle, part of the landscape, an extension of the desert itself. Sixth target, lying prone on a rock, binoculars fixed on the horizon. He looked almost like a brother sniper, patient and watchful, but he was watching the wrong place. Elena exhaled slowly. The bullet found him before he could ever spot her. Team. Carter fired again, this time hitting his target, though sloppily. The lookout dropped, but the shot was messy, tearing through the chest instead of the head. The body convulsed before going still. Carter puffed out his chest, muttering, 6, that's mine. Elena didn't correct him. She simply lined up her next shot. Target 7. A man leaning against a boulder, humming faintly, rifle resting. On his lap, he seemed relaxed, almost bored. Crack. He would never be bored again. 7, Elena whispered. Her voice was steady, but her pulse raced. The count mattered. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about proving to every man, on this mission, to Briggs, to Carter, to herself, that she belonged. The 8th target was trickier. He was concealed within a small stone outcrop, visible only when he leaned out to peer through binoculars. His body was hidden behind layers of rock, leaving only a sliver of his head exposed when he looked out. Patience. Timing. Elena waited. Seconds stretched into long, slow minutes. Her breath fogged faintly in the cold desert air. She ignored the ache in her shoulder, the sting of sand against her cheek. Finally, the man leaned out again. Crack. Half his skull vanished into the night. 8. Carter swore softly, unable to keep up. His breathing was ragged now, his confidence cracking under the weight of Elena's calm precision. Target 9, 1,050 yards, longest distance yet. The man was pacing, moving constantly, making himself difficult to hit. Carter lined up, fired, missed. The shot pinged off the rocks, sparking faintly in the moonlight. The lookout froze, spinning. Toward the sound, his rifle raised, his radio snapped up. Elena didn't hesitate. She led the target, adjusted half an inch, and squeezed. Crack. The bullet found his throat mid-step, dropping him before a word escaped his lips. 9. She said quietly. Her voice was a knife, cutting clean through Carter's ego. The team below paused, glancing up at the ridges. They weren't fools. They knew who was saving their lives. They knew whose shots were clearing their path. One of them whispered into the combs, voice hushed with awe. She's hitting everyone. Elena ignored it. Compliments meant nothing. The mission wasn't over. 2 left. Target 10, crouched near a heavy machine gun emplacement. If he raised the alarm, the valley could erupt in fire before the SEALs were halfway across. He was the linchpin. Elena steadied herself. Her cracked scope distorted slightly at the edges, but she trusted the center. Breathe in. Breathe out. Pause. The bullet punched cleanly through his right eye. He never touched the trigger. 10. Carter's jaw clenched. His face glistened with sweat. The final target. Number 11. He was different from the others. Standing tall, scanning with discipline. Radio already in hand. His posture screamed. Experience. The kind of man who wouldn't hesitate to call down hell at the first sign of trouble. Carter tried to beat her to it. He fired, missed. The bullet sparked against stone, and the lookout flinched. The man raised his radio. Shit. Carter cursed, fumbling with his bolt. Elena exhaled slowly, time slowing around her. Her crosshair steadied on his temple. Crack. The radio dropped from his hand, lifeless fingers loosening as his body pitched forward into the dust. 11, Elena whispered. The valley was silent again, silent and safe. For a long moment, no one spoke. The comms buzzed faintly with static, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. Then Briggs's voice crackled through, low and incredulous. Targets neutralized, all of them. A pause. Torres. You did that in less than 7 minutes. The men exchanged stunned glances. Carter stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time, not as a nuisance, not as a backup, but as the sniper who had just outshot him in every possible way. Elena stayed prone, cheek still pressed to the rifle, eyes scanning the ridges for any sign of movement. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply did her job. Team, Briggs said finally, his voice steadier now. Move in. The valley is clear, thanks to her. Elena's finger rested lightly on the trigger, her breathing slow and steady. The mission wasn't over yet. But in that moment, in the silence after the storm, she knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer just the doubted recruit. She was the sniper who had taken down 11 shadows in record time. And the men who had doubted her would never forget it. The valley stretched out like the ribcage of some ancient beast, all jagged stone and shadowed hollows. From above, it looked still, lifeless. But the men who moved into its depths knew better. Behind every boulder could be an ambush, every shadow a muzzle waiting to flash. Elena remained prone for a moment longer, her cracked scope sweeping the horizon. 11 lookouts were down. The valley should have been blind now. Still, her instincts whispered caution. Clear ridges, she murmured into comms. You're good to move. Briggs's voice came back. Copy. Moving. Below, dark figures slipped from cover to cover, ghosts against the desert floor. Their footfalls barely disturbed the sand. Elena tracked them, not with suspicion, but with vigilance. Her role wasn't done. A sniper's duty didn't end when the trigger cooled. Beside her, Carter adjusted his rifle with exaggerated calm. But his jaw was tight, his pride wounded. He said nothing, and that silence carried more weight than insults ever could. The descent to the valley was treacherous. Loose shale crumbled under boots, sending faint echoes bouncing through the stone corridors. Elena and Carter took the high path, providing overwatch as the team advanced. For 10 minutes, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then it changed. A flare burst suddenly in the distance, hissing as it painted the valley in harsh red light. From the far ridge, shouts erupted. Shadows moved. Armed men poured from hidden alcoves, roused by some unspoken alarm. The valley was alive. Contact left. Briggs barked. Gunfire erupted instantly, stuttering echoes ricocheting off the stone. Muzzle flashes bloomed like fireflies in the dark. Elena swung her scope, found the first figure rushing toward the team, and squeezed. Crack. The man folded mid-run. Carter fired too, but missed, his bullet sparking harmlessly against a rock face. He cursed, chambered another round, fired again, this time hitting, though sloppily. The enemy kept coming. The seals below moved with precision, fanning out, returning. Fire in controlled bursts. But the valley was a kill box, and they were at its heart. Elena suppressed that ridge. Briggs's voice thundered in her ear. She didn't hesitate. Her rifle barked rhythmically, each shot snapping another shadow back into the dust. She worked her bolt with fluid precision, never losing her breathing rhythm, never letting panic creep in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each target fell. Carter tried to keep pace. His shots grew hurried, sloppy. One missed so wide it ricocheted near the team below, drawing Briggs's furious roar. Carter, watch your goddamn line of fire. Elena said nothing. Her actions spoke louder. Minutes stretched into eternity. The air grew thick with cordite, the stench of blood and sand mingling. The red flare sputtered out, plunging the valley into blackness once more. Then came the sound Elena dreaded an engine. Her scope swung. Down the far slope, headlights bounced. A pickup truck rattled into view, mounted with a heavy machine gun. Its barrel swept hungrily toward the pinned seals. Vehicle incoming. Elena shouted. Carter lined up, panic edging his movements. I'll take it? No, she cut him off. Her finger tightened. Crack. The gunner's head snapped back, his body slumping over the mounted weapon. Another crack. The driver's skull erupted against the windshield. The truck veered wildly, slamming into a boulder before erupting in. Sparks. The valley shuddered with the crash. The comms went silent, save for Briggs's low, incredulous murmur. "Good shot, Torres." The firefight raged for another 10 minutes, but with Elena covering them, the SEALs pushed through. Bodies littered the sand, scattered among jagged rocks. The echoes of gunfire faded into the cold night. Finally, Briggs's voice cut in. "Valley clear? Form up." Elena exhaled, lowering her rifle. Her cheek ached from the pressure of the stock. Her shoulder burned from the recoil. But she didn't complain. Beside her, Carter was pale, sweating, his hands trembling slightly as he worked the bolt. His bravado was cracking like brittle glass. The team regrouped in a narrow gulch where shadows cloaked them. Briggs's voice came low but firm. "We move to the objective. Enemies awake now. No more surprises." The men nodded. No one mentioned the obvious truth that without Elena, half of them would already be dead. As they advanced deeper into the valley, Elena kept her rifle ready. But she also carried a new weight, responsibility. Her shots weren't just cover anymore. They were the line between survival and annihilation. They reached the compound an hour later. Hidden within a cleft of rock, it was little more than a scattering of low stone buildings reinforced with steel. A faint glow leaked from narrow windows. The enemy stronghold. The SEALs stacked against the wall, preparing to breach. Briggs turned his gaze upward. Torres, Carter, Overwatch, High Ridge, Northwest. Elena nodded. She moved swiftly, scaling the jagged slope with practiced hands. Carter followed, his breathing labored, his steps clumsy. From the ridge, they had a clear view of the compound. Elena settled her rifle into position, scope sweeping the windows. Shadows moved inside, armed, alert. The tension was suffocating. "Breach," Briggs whispered. The door below exploded inward, the SEALs storming through with lethal precision. Gunfire thundered inside the compound. Shouts, screams, a crash of furniture overturned. Elena scanned windows, ready to fire at the first hostile shape. She didn't wait long. A man burst from a side door, rifle raised toward Briggs's team. Crack. Elena dropped him instantly. Another sprinted for the truck parked outside. Crack. He never reached it. Inside, the chaos roared. But outside, Elena's calm precision kept the battlefield contained. Then, disaster. Carter fired suddenly, his shot wild. A bullet shattered. A window ricocheting inside. A SEAL staggered out moments later, clutching his bleeding arm. "God damn it, Carter!" Briggs's voice roared over Combs. "You hit Mason." Carter froze, his hands trembling. His eyes darted toward Elena, desperate, pleading silently for her not to speak. But she didn't need to. The truth was obvious. She adjusted her scope, cold and focused, scanning for threats while ignoring Carter's unraveling composure. The compound fell within minutes. Bodies were dragged out, weapons secured, explosives rigged. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, but exhaustion showed in their faces. Briggs approached the ridge, his gaze sweeping between Elena and Carter. His eyes lingered on her rifle, still hot from constant firing. "You kept us alive tonight." "Torres," he said finally. "Hell of a job." Elena gave a small nod. "Just doing my part, sir." Carter shifted uncomfortably, his silence louder than words. But the night wasn't done with them yet. As the SEALs prepared to exfil, a deep rumble echoed through the valley. Distant headlights flared to life, dozens of them. Reinforcements. Briggs's voice hardened. "We've got company. Torres, Carter, cover our withdrawal." The valley would soon be a storm of fire. Elena adjusted her scope, calm and ready. Her pulse slowed, her breathing even. She was the line between her team and annihilation once more. And she would not let them down. Not now. Not ever. The valley came alive again. First, it was the low growl of engines. echoing like thunder through the narrow gorge. Then came the beams of headlights, jagged spears of light, cutting through the darkness, bouncing off stone walls. Dozens of vehicles, kicking up plumes of dust as they snaked their way down the distant ridge. Elena adjusted her scope, her pulse steady despite the sight. Trucks, technicals with mounted guns. And somewhere in the convoy, she knew, would be the kind of fighters who didn't break easily. Reinforcements had arrived. On comms, Briggs's voice dropped an octave, calm but heavy. We're not outrunning that. Torres, harder you hold. The line. Buy us time to set charges and prep exfil. Understood? Elena didn't hesitate. Understood. Carter stammered, his throat dry. That's a full platoon coming at us. No time for fear, Briggs snapped. Just do your job. But Carter's job had already unraveled hours ago, and Elena knew it. From their overwatch ridge, the view was perfect too perfect. They could see every approach, every shadow, moving across the moonlit sand. It also meant the enemy would see them once the first muzzle flash gave away their position. Elena chambered around, her cheek pressed firmly against the worn stock. She counted breaths. She let the valley fall away until all that existed was her scope, her rifle, and the task at hand. The lead truck came into view, bouncing hard over the uneven terrain. A gunner swiveled atop its mounted DSHK, the heavy barrel sweeping hungrily across the valley floor. Crack! The gunner collapsed. His body slumped against the mount before tumbling to the ground. Crack! The driver's skull erupted against the glass, the truck veering wildly into another vehicle. The crash sent flames licking upward, casting twisted shadows across the valley. Walls. Torres has the lead, Briggs barked. Move, move. The SEALs below surged into motion, planting explosives along the compound's perimeter, rigging caches, preparing the valley to burn. But the convoy didn't falter. More trucks poured forward, men spilling from their beds like angry hornets. Gunfire erupted, streaking tracers slicing the night sky. Elena kept firing. One shot, one kill. Each crack of her rifle was a punctuation. Mark halting another advance. Carter fired too, but his shots went wide, his breathing ragged. He cursed under his breath, then louder when a ricochet sparked harmlessly against stone. They're closing in, he shouted, panic edging his voice. Elena didn't look at him. She couldn't afford to. The first wave reached the outer compound walls. They pressed hard, throwing themselves at the SEAL's position. From below, the sounds of close-quarters gunfire echoed short, controlled. Bursts, punctuated by the dull thud of grenades. Elena shifted her aim, covering doors, windows, rooftops. Every hostile who tried to flank the SEALs fell before they could raise their weapons. Crack! A man dropped from a ladder. Crack! Another fell as he crept across a rooftop. Briggs's voice came through, strained but resolute. Torres, you're saving our asses down here. She ignored the compliment. Compliments were distractions. Then the heavy machine guns roared. A pair of technicals had flanked wide, their barrels glowing as they spewed fire at the compound. The SEALs dove for cover, pinned. Sparks and stone. Shards erupted as rounds chewed through the walls. Torres, those guns, take them out, Briggs ordered. Elena swung her scope. The first gunner was already spitting death toward her team. She tracked him, exhaled, and fired. Crack! He toppled backward, his lifeless body dragged down by gravity. The second gunner ducked behind his shield. Elena waited, patient, as rounds carved into the valley wall around her. The moment his head rose, crack. Silence. Both guns went dark. The SEALs seized the opening, counterattacking with brutal efficiency. But the enemy kept coming. More and more fighters poured into the valley. What had begun as a firefight was morphing into a siege. Carter cracked under the pressure. His hands trembled as he tried to reload, fumbling the magazine. He swore, slammed. It encrooked, nearly jammed his weapon. "They're everywhere," he muttered. "We can't hold this. We're dead. We're dead." Elena's voice cut through the static like steel. "Then shoot. Don't talk." For a heartbeat, Carter glared at her, shame and fury twisting his expression. But he obeyed. His next shot cracked out wide again. Elena tuned him out. She had no room for failure. The battle dragged into the dead of night. The SEALs fell back from the compound, detonating charges that sent fireballs tearing through the buildings. The ground shook as stone walls collapsed. Inward, swallowing the stronghold in flames. Enemy fighters screamed, some cut down in the blasts, others scattered into disarray. But for every man killed, 2 more seemed to appear. "Torres, cover our retreat," Briggs barked. Elena shifted again, picking off pursuers as the SEALs bounded back in disciplined waves. She dropped one, then another her kill, count rising with grim precision. At some point, she realized her rifle was running dry. She checked her pouch, only 3 magazines left. Maybe 40 rounds. It would have to be enough. She slammed the mag into place, locked the bolt forward, and went back to work. The enemy's advance slowed under her relentless fire. For every man who tried to rush the SEALs, Elena's rifle barked a denial. Yet even as she bought them seconds, the inevitability gnawed at her. Ammunition runs out. Bodies tire. Lines break. But not hers. Not tonight. Beside her, Carter had stopped firing altogether. He sat frozen, his rifle limp in his lap, eyes wide as headlights. "They're too many," he whispered. Elena didn't look at him. "If you're not going to shoot, then stay out of my way." Her words landed like a slap. Carter flinched, shame etched deep across his face. But still, he didn't raise his weapon. The contrast was stark. One sniper paralyzed by fear, the other carrying the weight of an entire team on her shoulders. The enemy regrouped. Through her scope, Elena saw a new threat, a pair of mortarmen setting up tubes in the distance, their silhouettes clear against the ridgeline. If they started firing, the SEALs wouldn't stand a chance. She didn't hesitate. Crack. One collapsed mid-aim. Crack. The second slumped over the tube. Both dead before they could drop a single shell. Her breathing slowed again, her hands steady. She was exhausted, every muscle in her body screaming, but she refused to let it seep into her trigger finger. She was the line. And the line held. Finally, the sound Briggs had been waiting for crackled in their comms. "Bird inbound," the pilot reported. 2 mics out. Relief surged through the SEALs' ranks. Extraction was on the way. But for Elena, the fight wasn't done. Those 2 minutes might as well be 2 lifetimes. She kept firing, covering every move, every retreat, dropping pursuers before they could close. Her final magazine clicked into place. 30 rounds left to buy them freedom. 30 lives she could deny the enemy. The roar of rotor blades grew, louder, echoing through the valley. Dust swirled as a Black Hawk swept into view, its searchlight cutting through the chaos. "Go!" Briggs shouted. "Move to exfil." The SEALs sprinted, ducking low under suppressive fire. Elena covered their retreat, her scope snapping from target to target. Each shot was measured, each one deliberate. Crack, crack. She dropped the last fighter that tried to rush the helicopter. As the team loaded, Briggs's voice boomed. "Torres, harder move." Elena slid from her perch, sprinting down the ridge, her rifle slung across her back. Carter stumbled behind her, pale and shaken. They dove into the waiting Black Hawk as rounds sparked against its armor. The door gunner unleashed a storm of lead, carving a path of fire as the chopper lifted skyward. From above, the valley burned. Explosions rolled through the compound, lighting the night like a second sun. Enemy fighters scattered, tiny figures, dwarfed by the scale of destruction. Elena sat against the bulkhead, her chest heaving, sweat streaking down her dirt-stained face. Her hands still trembled, not from fear, but from the aftershock of sustained focus. Across from her, Carter stared at the floor, his silence louder than gunfire. Briggs moved through the cabin, his gaze landing squarely on Elena, for the first time all night. His voice carried something more than command. "Torres, you just held back an army." She said nothing. Words felt unnecessary. The battlefield had already spoken for her, and it had declared her the kind of sniper legends are written about. The valley disappeared beneath the Black Hawk as the desert wind howled through its open doors. Inside, silence pressed as heavy as the night sky. The battle was over, but its echo clung to every man in the cabin, the ringing in their ears. The acrid scent of spent brass and cordite, the dried grit of dust on their tongues. Elena Torres sat against the bulkhead, her rifle still across her lap. She hadn't let go of it since they'd lifted off. Her knuckles were white on the stock, her cheeks streaked with grime and sweat. The rifle wasn't just a weapon. It had been the line between life and death for every man in that berg. Across from her, Carter slumped in silence, his helmet off, his face pale. His hands shook slightly, not from adrenaline, but from something worse, shame. He hadn't fired a single useful shot in the last hour. Everyone in the cabin knew it. Briggs crouched in the center aisle, headset off, scanning his team with eyes like steel. He nodded once at Torres. No words, just a nod. The kind of nod soldiers carried for a lifetime. But the silence weighed heavier than any explosion. The Black Hawk touched down at a forward operating base 2 hours later. Floodlights bathed the landing pad in a sterile glow, and the team stumbled out, still in the haze of battle. Medics swarmed, checking wounds, pulling off gear, pushing water bottles into shaking hands. Elena waved them off. She wasn't wounded, at least not on the surface. Her mind, though, was an unquiet sea. Every shot she'd taken replayed in her skull, not with regret, but with precision. 47 confirmed, maybe more. She had become a machine out there. Carter didn't wave the medics off. He sat on a cot, staring at nothing while a corpsman checked him over. His body was uninjured. His spirit wasn't. Briggs left them both where they were and disappeared into the command tent. The debrief came at dawn. The team gathered in a cramped room, maps still pinned to the wall from the mission briefing. The air was thick with sweat, coffee, and exhaustion. A major from command sat behind the folding table, expression neutral, voice clipped as he ran through the report. The compound is destroyed. Enemy casualties estimated at over 80. 0 friendly KIA, 2 Waya. Mission successful. The words landed flat. Success didn't feel like success. It felt like survival scraped from the edge of annihilation. Then the major's gaze shifted. Specialist Torres stepped forward. Elena rose, boots scraping against the concrete. The room's eyes followed her, some weary, some respectful, one pair burning with jealousy. The major didn't embellish. Reports from your commander indicate you held the line against overwhelming enemy reinforcements. Confirmed neutralization of multiple heavy weapons, mortar teams, and dozens of combatants. Your actions directly prevented mission failure and saved lives. He paused, flipping through papers, then looked up again. Effective immediately, you are being recommended for commendation. Elena stood still. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She only said, "Understood, sir." The debrief ended. The team dispersed, some to chow, some to showers, some to empty bunks where nightmares waited. Carter stayed behind. Briggs caught him before he could slip away. The commander's voice was low, but sharp as a blade. You froze. You left your partner to carry you. Carter swallowed. You what? Briggs snapped. You panicked? You thought too much? You lost your nerve? Men die when snipers lose their nerve. Carter's jaw worked, but no words came. Briggs leaned closer. You'll answer for this. Not to me. To the brass. To yourself. His voice softened, barely. And maybe someday, if you've got any honor left, to her. He jerked his chin toward Torres, who was cleaning her rifle at the far end of the tent. Carter's eyes followed, then dropped. He couldn't look at her. The following days blurred. Elena kept to herself, as she always did. She maintained her rifle with ritual precision, its steel gleaming in the dim light. She wrote brief, factual notes in her logbook. Wind speed, elevation, distances, kills. She spoke little, but when she did, the men listened. Not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. The SEALs who once doubted her now lingered near her table at chow, small gestures of respect, growing each day. A nod in the hallway. A seat saved at the long wooden bench. Nothing said outright, but everything understood. Carter avoided her. He trained alone, ate alone, his silence a cage he couldn't escape. Every time he caught her reflection, he saw his own failure staring back. One evening, Briggs found Elena on the range. She was prone, sighting down her rifle at a target 1,000 yards out. The sun was setting, the sky bleeding orange into purple. She squeezed the trigger crack, and the distant steel plate rang like a bell. Still working? Briggs asked, stepping up beside her. She didn't lower the rifle. Always. He let her fire again before speaking. You know Carter's done, he said flatly. He'll be rotated stateside, maybe buried in some desk job if they're generous. He wasn't built for this. Elena said nothing. She adjusted her windage, exhaled, and fired again. Another bell. Briggs continued. But you were born for it. I've been in this game a long time. I've seen cocky shooters. I've seen natural killers. I've seen ghosts behind scopes. But I've never seen what you did in that valley. Finally, she rolled onto her side, sitting up to face him. Her eyes were tired, but unflinching. I didn't do it for recognition? Briggs almost smiled. Good, because legends don't ask to be recognized. They just are. The night before their redeployment, the team gathered one last time. Not in formation, not in any official capacity, just men around a fire barrel, coffee steaming in the cold desert air. Elena sat among them. No one questioned it anymore. She belonged there. Stories rolled, laughter rising and falling. They spoke. Of close calls, of absurd moments in chaos, of the dark humor soldiers cling to. Every man had a story from that night, but all of them circled back to the same truth. They were alive because one sniper refused to break. When the laughter quieted, Briggs raised his tin cup. To Torres, the others followed. Cups lifted. No long speeches. Just 3 words that carried the weight of their survival. To Torres, she didn't raise her own cup. She only nodded, her throat tight. For once, silence was enough. Carter wasn't there. He packed alone in the barracks. The sound of distant laughter drifting through the walls. He would leave with them, but not with them. He was already gone, a shadow swallowed by failure. For him, the valley would never stop burning. When dawn came, the Black Hawks lifted again, this time carrying them away from war's teeth. Elena sat in the same seat she had during the escape, her rifle across her lap once more. The desert stretched endlessly below, vast and indifferent. She thought of the men she'd killed. Not with guilt, not yet, but with a strange, solemn clarity. She hadn't just held a rifle. She had held lives. Theirs, hers, her team's. That was the weight no commendation could capture. Briggs leaned toward her over the thrum of rotors. His voice was steady, final. "They doubted you once," he said. "Never again." Elena met his gaze and turned back to the horizon. The desert swallowed the past behind them. The future waited in silence, and somewhere, etched into the marrow of every man on that helicopter, was the truth of what had happened in the valley. That night, when the line almost broke, it wasn't steel or strategy that held it, it was her.